County in Mineola with Nassau County Legislator Kevan for the 1st Legislative District. Thank you for taking time to speak with me, Legislator Abrahams.
Oh, my pleasure, Carson. Thank you for inviting me.
What areas are located in the 1st Legislative District?
Well, it's comprised of Roosevelt, Freeport, Baldwin, Hempstead, Uniondale, South Hempstead.
Is the new redistricting process going to affect your current district?
Yes, it will. I am going to be picking up areas of East Meadow, as well as I'll be losing portions of Freeport. I'll be getting larger areas of Hempstead. So all in all, I represent about 75,000 people. That's going to probably change by a third. So I'm going to be representing a totally new third of people.
You're on the Nassau County Legislature's minority leader. What does that mean?
Oh, wow. I ask myself that every day, too. But seriously, what it means is basically I'm the leader of the caucus. There are 19 legislators in Nassau County. There are Republicans and Democrats. I sit on the Democratic side. My colleague in the Republican side, her name is Norma Gonzalez. She is the presiding officer, but also the leader of her side, which is the Republican side, and I am the leader of the Democratic side. So there's a 10-9 split, 10 Republicans, 9 Democrats, and I am the minority leader for the Democrats in the Nassau County Legislature.
How do you become minority leader?
That's a good question. Generally, just like the people of Nassau County vote me in this case, my colleagues who also are voted in their respective districts vote me into leadership.
Do you have any additional duties that come with the minority leader's position?
Generally, the best duty and the largest duty I have is representing the interests of not just my own district. My district has very different interests in a lot of parts of the county, but it's understanding the interests of an Inwood. Now, I don't live in Inwood, but I have colleagues that are from there. My colleague Howard Coppell represents that area. So as the minority leader, you have to understand all the county issues, from Glen Cove to Inwood to Syosset to Great Neck. You just can't live by the ones in your district alone.
What made you decide that you wanted to go into public service?
Well, it wasn't money, but more seriously, it was probably more tied to that I felt the need to give back. I was inspired by a congressman. His name is Floyd Flake. He's also a pastor in Queens. I was inspired by him to get back and get into politics. I did an internship with him about, dating myself, 20 years ago when I was in college, and it just connected. And I decided this was the best way for me to get back, and it's kind of worked out. I mean, I've been in office now for 11 years, and I have no regrets.
Where did you go to school?
I went to St. Dominic's for high school on the North Shore, and then from there I went on to Queens College. I graduated from Queens, and then I started my master's in business administration at Baruch. For finance, and I am looking to go back for a healthcare management degree as well.
What kinds of subjects did you study to prepare yourself for public service?
That's a good question. I never thought I was going to be in politics until my junior year, so I really didn't do much studying that I thought I was going to be in politics at some point after that. I guess the best subjects that I studied were sociology subjects, studies which that probably prepared me more than anything else, understanding the conditions that people live through, and then probably political science, understanding the politics of how things work.
Each legislator serves on different committees. Which ones do you currently serve on?
Oh wow, that's a good question. I actually forget this from time to time. I am the chair of the Rules Committee, which is the committee that pretty much every single piece of legislation goes through. I also sit on the Planning Committee, and I sit on the Economic Development Committee. Not Economic Development.
Budget review.
Budget Review, sorry. Budget Review Committee.
You are also a ranking member on some of those committees. What is ranking member?
Good question. Well, you are only a ranking member when you are in the minority. The committee is chaired, and the committee is chaired, the chairman or chairwoman is selected by the party that's in power, which is the Republican Party. So the ranking member generally means that you are the highest ranking member in the minority side of the legislature, which is in this case the Democrats.
Do you get to choose which committee you would like to serve on? Because each person comes into office with different experiences and knowledge, so that could benefit a committee and its goals, couldn't it?
Yes, it could. Before we sit down to begin a session, our session begins at the beginning of every 2 years. What I try to do, and I just became leader last year, but I sit down with all the members and find out what they would like to do and what their goals are for the upcoming 2 years. And then I try to fit that with the committees that we have. And generally, I would say 99% of the time, everybody is happy with their committee assignments because it fits into, if you're interested in the environment, I try to get you on the planning committee. If you're interested in West Nile and health issues, I get you on the health committee. If you're interested in the finances of the county, we try to get you onto the finance committee or the budget review committee. So for the most part, we've been very good at assigning everyone to their particular committees.
I'd like to talk to you about your work on the environment. Superstorm Sandy did a lot of damage to our country. We lost a lot of plants and trees, and Sandy really hit our shores. Have there been committee discussions about the damage to our natural environment?
Oh, there are many discussions. We have already encountered and plan to spend over $200 million addressing Sandy-related issues. One of the bigger issues that's impacted Nassau County has been our ability at our sewage treatment plants. A lot of people don't like to talk about this stuff, but when you flush and you use the water throughout your home, whether you use it to bathe or to wash dishes, it goes somewhere. And at the end of the day, it goes into our treatment plants, which pumps out 65 million gallons of sewage every day. And from that standpoint, those plants need to be up and running. We had to spend a considerable amount of money because those plants flooded during the storm. And what happened was a lot of people lost their homes because those plants flooded and were backed up. So that's one of the more serious things that we've spent money on related to Sandy, but obviously we lost a lot of trees. I'm sure where you live, you saw a lot of trees fall down, and we have an extensive tree program also to replant all those trees as well.
What kinds of plans are made to replace the plants and trees that were lost, especially in our parks and other public and protected areas?
Well, that's going to tie into our tree program that I was just referencing. We're going to, in some of our preserves, we lost literally a third, sometimes even more of our trees that have been damaged in the storm. We're going to try to aggressively try to replant as many of those trees as possible. The problem is a lot of the preserves were very unsafe for a long period of time. We literally had to get crews in there that trees, not all the trees completely fell down. A lot of them were partially down, and from that standpoint, we had to get crews in there to make sure that the areas where the trees were safe. So before we can get in there and really do replanting. But the best time to replant, believe it or not, is not in the summer or not in the spring. From what I understand, the trees that fell down, the best time to plant would be in the fall. So we'll be out there aggressively this fall, replanting many of the trees in our preserves, as well as along our streets and our downtown areas.
Is there a budget set aside for any kind of replanting?
Yes, we have a few $1 million that's set aside for tree replanting in the county.
Many homes and communities benefited from having permanent sand dunes on their beaches and coastal areas because they help to block incoming water. Is the county discussing the function and need for sand dunes and mandating that your communities focus on this need and address this issue?
Yes, actually we're working with the city of Long Beach. They have expended an enormous amount of resources in building many of these dunes, and we're going to continue to work with them from the county standpoint to try to ensure we try to protect our residents along the South Shore to the best of our abilities.
A lot of sand was washed onto land and into our streets along coastal communities during Sandy. Are these communities allowed to put that sand back onto beaches and use it to build or add to existing dunes that have been damaged?
I believe right now that any particular sand that's being used as part of the dunes is going to be removed. We can't. That sand can't be recycled. Is what I'm trying to say. We're going to use it, but not in that capacity again. So from that standpoint, we envision the sand that's currently being used now, whether it gets washed away or it gets eroded. What we envision is anything that's left over after this particular season, we will recycle that sand back in.
How are you going to recycle the sand?
Well, generally what it will mean is that the sand that's there will be removed, and we would bring in new sand to replace the old sand. So I say recycle, but I don't mean in the sense that we're going to reuse the same sand that we used before. What I use it in the term that basically we'll preserve what's there and what can be used, and then we'll remove what needs to be removed from that standpoint and add to what we need to be able to put back in place.
I did a story on the protected piping plovers and other wildlife that come to our area during the summer. Has your committee considered the fact that their nesting areas and homes for other wildlife in our area have been damaged?
We look into that, but probably not to the greater degree that we should. We rely actually on the Audubon societies and the other wildlife groups to be able to give us more of a concrete knowledge on exactly their nesting places and what we should be doing more. From our standpoint, we have spent an enormous amount of resources coordinating these groups. We haven't heard anything from endangering their livelihoods based on Sandy yet, but obviously there's still more time for that to come up, and as that issue comes up, we'll definitely make sure we address it.
What kinds of things can volunteers do to help restore our natural environment that was damaged during the storm?
Well, the best thing we can do for our natural environment is to allow it to come back in a very peaceful as well as passive way. And what I mean by that is basically currently right now we want to be able to try to utilize our preserves, and the best way for the preserves to come back, honestly, is for folks to be very patient and allow them to come back naturally. We're going to be going very aggressively planting the trees and getting things back up to and restoring those things. But we ask folks to be very delicate with our preserves, and we spend an enormous amount of resources protecting them, especially from folks that choose to use them for misconduct and criminal activity. So that's the best thing that we can try to do to guard ourselves. Is the last thing we need is to put out more fires and to deal with more misconduct that goes on in many of our preserves. That's the best thing we could do. So we need people to be more cognizant and be the eyes to protect the preserve, and to call the police when they feel that there is activity going on in the preserves that shouldn't be going on.
Has the county considered asking community groups like the Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, maybe even school groups and clubs to help in a replanting effort?
I don't know if the county has done that. That would probably come from the county executive's office, but I can tell you in my legislative district, we have reached out to the Girl Scouts as well as many other voluntary groups to help out with planting. I mean, not really related to Sandy, but we have participated, and I've worked with the Sanitation District Number 2, as well as the South Hempstead Civic Association, where we go out annually and work on not just cleaning up the area, but also plantings all throughout the area. That's going to probably tie into, obviously, this season with Sandy, because this is the first spring season since Sandy. So a lot of the work wasn't really germane to Sandy, it's annual work, and I think from that standpoint, it's really going to capture much of the necessary replanting that we're going to be striving to try to do.
you focus on is helping protecting children. Can you please tell me why this is important to you?
Well, I mean, it's important from the standpoint that children are our most precious commodity. And I think young people are the future of this county. And right now, in the political arena, young people don't have a voice. Until they're eligible to vote, it's very hard for them to get their point across and then hold people accountable for it. The best thing that's for our democracy is that if you don't like what an elected official is doing, you can vote them out. You can vote against them. But young people, especially those under the age 18, don't have that right. So I chose to be an advocate to speak up for those folks and those young people and give them an opportunity to express themselves to me, and then I can express myself to the county executive as well as to the legislature so that their concerns are heard.
What are some of the youth-related projects you are currently working on?
Wow, oh, there are a few. Let's see,